So for months now, I have been trying to get prominent creationist scientist James Tour to make a video discussing his thoughts on amyloids, and more specifically, the amyloid world hypothesis for abiogenesis, or the origin of life. Now, initially, James told me that he didn't really know much about amyloids, and so he wouldn't be able to comment on it until he had read more. And he asked me to provide him the links to some of the subsequent literature, and telling me that he would let me know his thoughts once he had read through it. And I'm still waiting for that. Finally, from one of his own fellow creationists in a recent live stream he was in, asked him the question about amyloids straight up in a somewhat less coherent way than maybe somebody else would have asked him, but still, somebody publicly asked him about amyloids. And how did James respond to this? Well, he immediately just started talking about me, Grayson.
Dr. Tour, are amyloids solving any origin of life problem?
The answer is yeah. The answer is no. This is from Grayson. He's a young man who spoke to me at the debate, and then he made a video about me. He's a YouTuber. It became very clear to me he was just trying to promote his YouTube channel by provoking me so that I'd contest with his YouTube channel like I did with Dave's YouTube channel.
I guess I'm the main amyloid guy to him. I mean, I've sent him numerous studies from half a dozen or more researchers, like actual researchers in the field doing research on amyloids in the context of abiogenesis. But I'm the amyloid guy because I guess I was the first person to bring this to his attention, so he'll just forever associate amyloids with me. Kind of weird. But then he goes on to say that, I'm just a clout chaser. I'm just trying to do this to drum up views, when literally the initial email that I sent him about this, I never mentioned my YouTube channel at all. In fact, in that original email I sent him was because he claimed in a video that no one had ever shown aqueous peptide synthesis. I sent him a paper showing that amyloids are polypeptides that have been demonstrated to be synthesized in aqueous solutions without protecting groups. Exactly the kind of paper that he said did not exist. So I sent him this paper and said very clearly, I would just like to hear your feedback. This is the biggest subject I'd like to hear your take on. I just asked him for his thoughts. I didn't ask him to do any videos. I didn't bring up my own channel or anything. So this was the first email several months before the debate. So then in a second email after the debate, when I met with him in person, and he told me again that he'd never heard of amyloids, did not know much about them, and would need to read more literature on them in order to give me any kind of, response. So then I followed up with him. I sent him all the appropriate literature, literally multiple papers on amyloids, all aspects of them, and radio silence. He never tells me any of his problems with these papers at all, and he has not yet to make a video on it. I sent him the video I made debunking him, and I said, I would love to have a discussion with you about this topic, but I understand that I'm a very small channel, you're a very big channel, it might not be worth your time. And I would just like to be interested in hearing your response on a scientific, substantive basis. So I guess I'm a clout chaser for that one. And his response, he was not too happy with that debunking video that I made.
Dave Farina's YouTube channel, when he first provoked me, had 780,000 or so, 700 and something thousand subscribers. Now he's got 2.5 million. So you poke Jim Tour, he goes after you and your YouTube channel. So Grayson did the same thing. He came up to me very nicely at the end of the debate. He talked with me, and then he made a YouTube video which was not flattering at all. I mean, just took little segments out of context, and so that's Grayson. And so I said, I'm not going to go on your YouTube channel to try to bring more people to it. No.
Okay, so not only does James Tour seem to attribute Professor Dave's YouTube channel subscriber growth purely to himself, which, I mean, I'm not going to do any psychological analysis, but that's a little bit narcissistic, especially considering that Professor Dave's video about James Tour is like not even in his like top 10 or maybe even top 15 or 20 most popular videos. I mean, most of his most popular videos are like flat earth debunks or like, basic introductions to concepts in biochemistry or something. Like it's not like James Tour's content on Dave's channel is like his bread and butter, his most successful stuff. This was kind of like a side thing that Dave does on his channel with Dr. Tour and debunking other creationists. It's definitely not his most popular content. And the fact that James Tour seems to take the credit for Dave's subscriber growth, even though James Tour, I mean, what were his subscriber numbers when he first started making videos about Professor Dave? I mean, how much subscriber growth has Dr. Tour experienced as a result of these back and forths with Professor Dave, who, to my knowledge, has literally always had a much larger channel and platform than Dr. Tour has? So if anything, who has benefited the most from that? I would say it's James Tour and his subscriber count. I mean, he's gotten way more followers now because of his engagements with Professor Dave than I think Professor Dave has gotten because of his engagements with Dr. Tour. But okay. He says he doesn't want to give me my channel those number of eyeballs. He's afraid that, if he engages with me or makes videos about or with me, that my YouTube channel will just become too popular and I'll be too successful. And he does not want to see that happen. All right, fair enough. And let's be very clear about something, okay? In my debunking video of James Tour, I did not take those clips out of the context of his argument. I did not misconstrue his argument or strawman him or try to quote mine him out of context. I played the clips so that James Tour could make his own argument in his own words. And I didn't try to alter what his position was. It's not my fault that in the clips when he's making his arguments, he is yelling and flailing his hands around and acting like a raging lunatic. Okay? I didn't make him act that way. And again, he has actually done this to others. Like, actually removing the context and showing clips purely to try to embarrass them, like he's done with Dave. I mean, he's definitely done that with Dave, trying to pull up old music videos from the past to try to edit it together to make him look silly. He has done that himself. And even worse, he has taken quotes out of their context or misconstrued somebody's positions, like he did in that very debate with Lee Cronin. He took a joke of a tweet that Lee Cronin has said was in tongue-in-cheek, and he tried to pass it off to the audience as if that was accurately representing Lee Cronin's actual positions. That tweet, he even wrote it on the board. I mean, that is fundamentally dishonest, and he should have known better, and yet he's trying to say that I was disrespectful and that I was such a bad person for taking these clips of him like yelling and screaming, but making his arguments. And I did not change the context of those arguments. I did not address straw mans. I addressed his actual arguments. And he's trying to make that an excuse for why he won't engage with me, or why he thinks I'm disrespectful, or why what I did was so bad, when he has literally done much worse himself. I mean, it's like the amount of projection on this. I mean, it's the pot calling the kettle black for sure. Again, though, I just want to be very clear about this. I'm not the amyloid guy. There are literally dozens of researchers, published, peer-reviewed, credentialed researchers in origin of life and biochemistry that are studying and publishing about amyloids and the amyloid world hypothesis for abiogenesis, not me. James Tour can make an entire video about the amyloid world hypothesis and never once bring my name up or talk about my channel. He doesn't need to popularize me or this channel in order to talk about amyloids and talk about the literature in amyloid world hypothesis. So it's just weird to me that he keeps trying to tie this back to me and my channel and saying, well, I won't talk about amyloids because Grayson will just get too popular. Like, that's not logical, James. Just talk about the actual science. Go into, delve deep into the actual literature and talk about why you think that the amyloid world hypothesis is wrong or doesn't solve any issues in the field. Just talk about the science. Be substantive. Don't make this a drama about Dave and Grayson and all this stuff. Okay? This doesn't have to be a YouTube drama. This could just be you talking about the science. So, without ado, he finally gets through all this stuff about me, and he finally, in this clip, actually talks about the science of amyloids. And guys, he gets it so wrong. It's like, it's not even funny at this point. Like, I understand that like James Tour is like a talented synthetic organic chemist, but I mean, his understandings of like literally the very basics of amyloid chemistry, like protein chemistry, biochemistry, you can tell by the things that he says. He's clearly out of his element. I mean, he's getting stuff wrong that like literally like intro classes in biochemistry or like it's just amazing the depths of his mistakes here. I'm just gonna let it play and then we'll talk about it afterwards. But guys, it is stunning the basic science that he gets wrong in this clip.
What he does is he says, okay, in amyloids, they don't need to fold. They can get into the position naturally. And he argues that you don't need you can just use a subset. You can just use 10 of the amino acids. You don't need the other 10 amino acids that have functional side chains. Nobody has ever shown that you can get away with just 10 of the amino acids.
Oh my God. I'm sorry, guys, but I already have to stop it because it's just too bad. How can you misunderstand basic protein chemistry this poorly as a professional chemist? It's like, it's mind-blowing, guys. No one is saying that amyloids don't have to fold. I really don't know how. I have no idea what James Tour is talking about here or how he got this into his head that somehow I said or anybody said that amyloids don't have to fold. I mean, definitionally, amyloids have a beta pleated sheet structure, okay? It's a secondary structure. How can you possibly have a secondary structure if there's no folding? It makes no sense. They're not just polypeptide chains of like one-dimensional chains. They have a three-dimensional conformation. They had to fold. I mean, maybe he's getting like chaperone assisted folding confused with just regular spontaneous folding, but I've got news for you, James. Spontaneous folding of proteins is still folding. Like, amyloids can form spontaneously. They don't need a protein chaperone to tell them how to fold. And again, the studies demonstrate this. The studies that I've sent to you multiple times now demonstrate this. And I don't understand how he thinks that he could read these studies and he can think that anybody is saying that amyloids don't fold. It's nonsense. It's like utter nonsense. This is freshman stuff. How can a professional be getting basic facts like this wrong? And then he talks about how nobody has ever demonstrated that all you need is 10 amino acids. Need them for what, James? I mean, you have the paper. I sent you the paper multiple times now, where they literally just use 7 out of the 20 amino acids, and they get amyloids forming spontaneously in aqueous solutions without protecting groups. So what are you talking about? You literally have the data. I have sent you these papers before. How can you be lying about this stuff? I mean, I don't even know. I don't even want to say that he's lying. He might just be getting confused and maybe doesn't remember the papers that he's read properly. But like, literally, this is in those papers. They show how this happens. I mean, I asked him, please criticize their methodologies. Please criticize these papers. He offers me nothing and then appears on a live stream months later and literally just gets basic science wrong. I mean, oh God, let's just play the rest of this clip.
Plus, even if you have those 10, you have to have those polymerizing. The chances of getting them are very, very hard. So you have 10 amino acids, even if you had something that was 50 units long. So then you'd have 10 to the 50th possible combinations to give you it.
Oh God. I mean, literally cannot even get through 5 seconds of his explanations before he says something just patently wrong and like really shocking misunderstandings of things. I mean, he has seen the papers. I have sent him the papers. They show polymerization happening spontaneously in aqueous solutions with no protecting groups. I mean, we've had the science on how carbonyl sulfide mediates this polymerization since 2004. I mean, 20 years. He's known that carbonyl sulfide can can catalyze polymerization of polypeptides. I mean, this is a basic volcanic gas, a naturally occurring prebiotic volcanic gas, carbonyl sulfide. I mean, he should be aware of this. So, talking about, oh, you have this polymerization problem, it's literally in the experiment. It was shown to polymerize. I don't know what to tell you, James. He's saying, oh, there's all these combinations that you can get whenever you just have polymerization. Yeah, that's the point, James. Amyloids can form with like a huge number of different sequences. You don't need a specific sequence of amino acids to form an amyloid. I mean, amyloid formation is like almost universal. Like almost any sequence of amino acids can form an amyloid. So you're just wrong on this, and you don't even understand why you're wrong, and it's like, it's honestly embarrassing.
And then he says, and you don't have to worry about it folding because amyloid doesn't have to fold. Well, the vast majority of enzymes need to be folded. Amyloid is a specific type. And nobody in their right mind looks at this and says, this solves the polymerization problem. It doesn't, because the free energy is positive. And so those don't want to polymerize. They keep going back to starting material. Ahmed, you know something about free energy being an engineer. So when the free energy is positive, it keeps wanting to go back. They hydrolyze, they go to starting material. So this idea that amyloid solves it, this is another naive idea by somebody who understands very little about the science and the chemistry behind this. You never solve the free energy problem in making those polymers. They always want to go back. And even when you try to make them with 10 amino acids, nobody's ever shown functionality from these things. And the amyloids aren't just based on 10. So it's a very naive idea.
Okay, so as just some naive person who doesn't understand the science involved, I challenge you, Dr. Tor, please show the math on the energetics here. Because, what do you know? There's a lot of published, peer-reviewed chemistry studies showing that amyloids are incredibly stable. And it's like extremely difficult to get them to solubilize because they're so stable, and they do not readily hydrolyze and just go back to the starting ingredients. This is not something that happens. It's actually, the energetics make sense because once you form amyloids, it's incredibly difficult to go backwards in that reaction, and it's just mind-blowing. Like, this is very basics of amyloid chemistry, like the basic of the basics, just talking about the stability of amyloids. Come on. How does Dr. Tor not even get this level? I mean, it's the most basic level of understanding that you could possibly have reading any amount of amyloid literature out there. And yet, he's on here spewing, like, I mean, he says amyloids are very special because they don't fold, and he says that the energetics involved would just cause the amyloids to break down into the starting reactants right away. I mean, has this man never read anything about amyloids? These are the most basic facts about amyloids, are how stable they are and how they don't just regularly hydrolyze. These are the basics. And then he says, oh, nobody has ever shown that amyloids can have any kind of enzymatic or catalytic activity. Really, James, did you not read the papers I already sent you months ago? These papers that clearly show the catalytic enzymatic function of amyloids form spontaneously. Like, what? How? I mean, at this point, he just has to be not reading any of this. Clearly, the things that he's talking about here show that he doesn't know anything about amyloid chemistry. He's getting the very basics of the science wrong. I mean, how can anyone think that he is an expert to be talking about origin of life research when he knows so little about the basic chemistry of proteins. Like, I mean, he might know about organic chemistry and synthetic organic chemistry, but clearly his understanding of biochemistry, he needs to go back to like Biochem 101 here, because he's getting basic facts from Biochem 101 incorrect. And finally, I want to make this point a little bit more stronger than in my previous debunking video of James Tour, because a lot of people in the comments seemed confused about this. The reason why I've debunked James Tour's argument is because I have shown that it rests on an assumption that he cannot logically justify. And that is that all 20 amino acids are necessary for the origin of life. Now, he has not offered any rational or empirical basis to justify him making this assumption. So as long as that is the assumption that all of his arguments flow from, and it is, then his arguments are based on an unfounded, unjustified assumption. So until he can justify that assumption, his arguments are debunked. I'm sorry, James. I'm sorry for James's supporters, but you need to be able to justify your assumptions, okay? And it's not like me asking him to justify his assumption means that he's going to just switch the burden of proof onto me and say, well, you need to show that you can start life in your lab from just 10 amino acids. That's not how the burden of proof works, James. You are making an argument about abiogenesis, and your argument rests upon an assumption that you have not been able to justify. You are the one with the burden of proof that you need to justify making that assumption. You failed on the night of the debate, and I showed that in my video on it. And you've failed here to even understand the very basics of amyloid chemistry. It's just downright embarrassing for somebody of your caliber to be getting such basic facts wrong. So for everyone that was hoping that maybe a Grayson and James Tour debate would happen, it's not looking very likely.
I appreciate the question. Thank you. So this way I could address Grayson without taking on his channel, because I'm not here to support his channel.